And I want to help our audience today understand how we got here. And I want to start, well, you can start wherever you want to, but I definitely want you to comment on Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood, because we have really not covered that a whole lot on this podcast. And I really want to cover it because I know that, there have been people who have done some really great work getting this out into the open. But then, of course, you have the Planned Parenthood apologists who deny certain things and reframe and spin the narrative and then say, oh, well, we'll take her name off of this and that. So maybe, if you want to go earlier than that, go wherever you want to go. But I'd love to just figure out, how did we get here in America to the place where we are literally... It's like, I can't even believe what I saw just online this morning, that they're asking questions like, can a 2-year-old actually, know that they want to transition to another gender or something like this? And I'm just going,
that's right.
I mean, I know what's going on. You know what's going on. Help us connect those dots.
Schaeffer used to talk about how Christians tend to deal with ideologies, philosophies, and culture in bits and pieces, rather than seeing how the whole thing goes together. And I mean, Schaeffer and his protege, and one of my favorite, Nancy Pearcey, have been so helpful to the body of Christ in helping explain the breadth, depth, and beauty of a Christian worldview. But when we deal with bits and pieces, like, well, let's take off the abortion box and let's open that and let's talk about how that happened and why would people believe that? And okay, let's put the abortion box back on the shelf, Alisa. Let's take out our LGBTQ LMNOPIA, my name is Legion box every June, and let's open that. And why do they want to diddle the kids? And why does the UN want to reduce the age of consent and say it's 10 or 11 years old, even though it might not be recognized legally as such? And kids should be able to consent to sex because they're sexual beings. And okay, let's put that box back and let's take out our critical race theory box. And, let's talk about critical theory, and let's talk about the Frankfurt School and Herbert Marcuse and Antonio Gramsci and the strategy of the robes. And okay, and then let's put that box back on the shelf. And we're not effective when we deal with culture and ideologies like that. Every religion has a dominant sort of philosophy or ideology that helps all of its seemingly disparate pieces connect. And our Christian worldview is the most broad and deep worldview that there is, that actually has answers to all of these questions. And so too many Christians try to master topics by themselves, like abortion, the trans stuff, the parental rights stuff, the sexual curriculum stuff. But there is a worldview behind these things. And we need to be able to actually to speak to that if we're to help the next generation not be ideologically screwed. And sometimes that actually literally leads to being screwed. I apologize for the crassness, but I mean, we're seeing pedophilia, sexual pornography addiction, and child rape like we have never seen before in America. That's a whole nother box that we could open. But we actually have to understand how all this stuff kind of goes together. I mean, for example, Margaret Sanger, literally at the end of her life, was teaching her teenage daughter about sexual petting and sex, and told her granddaughter, okay, this is the founder of the largest, best funded, and most profitable 501c3 in human history, Planned Parenthood. Sanger, in her later years, was teaching her teenage granddaughter that she said, I think sex about 3 to 4 times a day is a good number. Sanger had more affairs than I could recount on this podcast. And these are things you're not going to learn about unless you really do your research. There has been a very intentional campaign, Alisa, to curate the life and legacy of Margaret Sanger. You can actually watch it if you are really if you're really a researcher and you read all these materials. You can see some of the more uncomfortable truths and sides of her life begin to disappear from some of the later coverage and writings by Planned Parenthood and some of her biographers. And no one's, by the way, covered this better than Dr. George Grant, a mentor and advisor to me and my new project and book coming out this summer. And he wrote the bombshell book on Planned Parenthood in 1988 called Grand Illusions, The Legacy of Planned Parenthood. And no one would debate him. No one at Planned Parenthood would debate him on the topic of his book because they could not. And so why bring up Sanger at all, right? Well, sure, Seth's a pro-life speaker, so you want to be the expert on Planned Parenthood. Yeah, sure, but no, actually. We're talking about maybe the most successful, let me be very clear, the most successful Marxist, sexual, revolutionary, progressive activist of the last 115 years. Don't take my word for it. Here's one of her many lovers. Ever heard of the name H.G. Wells? He wrote a book called War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
One of Sanger's many lovers, Alisa. He said that, Alexander the Great, he changed a few boundaries and killed a few men. Both he and Napoleon were forced into fame by circumstances outside of themselves and by currents of the time. But Margaret Sanger made currents and circumstances. When the history of our civilization is written, it will be a biological history. And Margaret Sanger will be its heroine.
Wow.
This woman has been called the patron saint of feminism, breaking through every quote unquote glass ceiling that the sexists and chauvinists were trying to keep women down with. And today, her organization is the largest abortion provider in the world. By their own celebration, they're the largest provider of the pornographic comprehensive sexuality education, Alisa, in America's public schools, that's bringing all those angry moms and dads to school board meetings. Yep, you heard me correctly, Christian. Planned Parenthood is the largest provider of the pornographic comprehensive sex ed. And as of 2023, they are the second largest provider of cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers. Planned Parenthood is the second largest provider of transgender drugs.
Of transgender drugs too. Wow.
Drugs for minors. So it's like, okay, I thought we should just talk about babies, Alisa, and Seth should just tell us not to kill babies because they're so precious. Yeah, sure. Okay, that's wonderful. But Planned Parenthood doesn't stay in their lane. Trans drugs for kids in the transgender industry, which includes government contracts, curriculum conferences, and the drugs, is now Planned Parenthood's fastest growing revenue stream. Okay, so there is a dominant undergirding worldview that helps us understand and explain this out of control, kooky culture of death. There's many places we could start, but there is a name to this false religion. It's called Gnosticism or Gnostic dualism. This belief that the sort of the physical world, right, like, is not real. It can't be trusted. It's the result of the creation of an evil demigod. That's ignorant of the one true good God. I mean, Paul in Colossians has to preach against Gnosticism, right? There's a reason why John says, if you want to test the spirits, Alisa, ask them, did Jesus Christ come in the flesh?
Yeah.
Because the Gnostic belief at the time was that the fallen physical world was evil. It couldn't be trusted. It didn't give us any clues to our real identity. And so there became this obsession with the inward self, the soul. Today, the trans movement tries to talk about the soul when they use words like my authentic self, my real identity, right? Ever heard the phrase born in the wrong body? It's like, what are they saying there? They're saying that I am not my body. My body's this shell and vessel that the real me resides in, but I can liberate the real self from the bondage of biology. Well, it's the same underlying worldview that drives abortion, Alisa. Let's think about it like this. Okay, the real person is metaphysical. This is what the Gnostics believe. Let me be very clear if you're listening to this, Christian. The transgender movement and religion is a movement of a false religion called Gnosticism that says I am not my body and the real me is my inward identity. So that my body's kind of like a Corvette that me, the driver or real person, steps into. But if that's the case, then why not take your vessel to a body shop and give it a makeover so that the outside feels more like the inside? Exactly. And here we are at the front door of transgenderism. So if the real person is metaphysical, Alisa, and not physical, and so this vessel, it's like, hey, woo, we love the Alisa Childers podcast. Well, you didn't just hear Seth clap. That's not Seth. Those are just weird phalanges of a physical vessel. But the real me is invisible because it's a metaphysical soul inside this fallen body. Really weird and kooky. Guess what? It's the same religion that drives abortion. Because if the real person is metaphysical, then the real person is the mind, right? You think of like Rene Descartes, like I think, therefore I am, right? And we get this idea that the real person is found in the mind alone. And so until the mind has self-awareness, consciousness, and desires, then there is no person there yet. And so when I abort a baby in the womb, I don't kill a human being. I just dissect a body. Because, says the pro-choicer, Alisa, the real person is not there yet. And this is why Peter Singer, the one of the architects of the culture of death, by the way, in the 20th and 21st century in Australia, that old fart in Australia who defends killing babies through 1 year old. Oops, sorry. No, you didn't hear YouTube. Just pause there, Christian.
Right.
1 year old outside of the womb is because he's consistent. And he actually says, I'm right, Alisa. He says, yeah, there is no personhood qualifications at the third trimester, but neither is there right after birth, meaning self-awareness, consciousness, and desires. And so if the third trimester baby doesn't have that and the infant doesn't have that, then both of them are disqualified from the community of persons. Both of them don't have rights.
Yeah.
So this same Gnostic religion belief drives both the killing of babies and the transgender movement today. But it also was the predominant false religion behind the entire sexual revolution, of which Margaret Sanger was its patron, heroine, and saint. Yeah. Because if I am not my body, then the material world is just is like clay in the potter's hands to be molded to bring me the most pleasure. If my real self is a metaphysical, invisible soul, and this body is just this fleshy substance that I get to use or utilize however I want, then the sexual revolution starts to make a lot of sense, Alisa. If it feels good, do it. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And no one lived that false religion, and no one applied that false religion to our culture in a more significant, impactful, and damaging way than Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, whose sordid history we can get into together for the next 30 minutes if you'd like to. But if we're to understand how this culture was created, we need to be like the sons of Issachar again and understand how it was created so that we can preach the truth and offer the Christian alternative of what our bodies were for and how we were intended to live. Not because we're shoving our religion down your throat, but because we want you to live in accordance with the Creator's design.